Hey everybody, Tanya Diamond here, and this would be our sixth class for the Sacred Healing for Women, Learning to Be Your Own Sexual Healer. And thank you also very much for understanding today. Next week, it's going to kind of be the same thing. What happened is I have a contract client that changed their schedule, and I had committed to their things before our things. So therefore, I must do what's the right thing to do, and I can't reschedule their things, so I must reschedule our things. So my apologies. And so today's class and next week's class will be at a different time like it is today. I can either pre-record it like that, or we can come up with a different solution. And then I will be, of course, there for our final class. So today I want to go over the what I asked you to do last time was some belly breathing, which many of you found to challenge the fact that you were actually reverse breathing. So if you're reverse breathing, you're basically breathing in and your stomach's getting smaller. You're breathing in and your chest comes up. And if you're belly breathing, your stomach relaxes and gets big on the inhale and smaller on the exhale. So inhale, wide, exhale, skinny, inhale, wide, exhale, skinny. Reverse breathing is a pattern you must break. So you may have to spend extra time changing your reverse breathing and getting through that, because while you're reverse breathing, you're just going to have basically anxiety chemistry running through and through yourself completely all the time. And it's going to be difficult to do anything and everything else until you do that. So if you are reverse breathing, you've got to pay extra attention when you're doing the breathing exercises to do it correctly. And just know that it may take you a little longer. You may have to up your breath work practices to change that around, but it's going to be well worth changing it around, because while you're a reverse breather, your entire physiology is running incorrectly. It's not someplace you want to be. Okay, pelvic thrusting. We find it interesting how you do this is how you do everything else. So if you're in there just thrusting your pelvis, and you're going for it, that's not what I said. This is not a workout. None of this is a workout. Nothing that we're doing is supposed to be a workout. It's supposed to be a gentle exploration, awakening awareness. So like the Kegels, the pulsing I was asking you to do, wasn't pulse, pulse, pulse. It wasn't Kegels. We were not doing Kegels. We were pulsing to feel something, to bring our awareness down to our yoni. Pelvic thrust, same thing. We're just I'm on a ball, so it's kind of interesting on the ball, but basically rocking my pelvis back and forth. I can be sitting. Some people were talking about laying, which I think that's tougher, but I don't know. As long as it's bringing awareness to your pelvis. These are somatic exercises that are bringing awareness to your pelvis. That's all, not a workout. We're not trying to build muscle. We're not trying to do any of that. In fact, for a lot of people, their pelvic floor is too tight, and causing chronic tightness causes lack of arousal as well as too loose. The other thing was chanting, and some of you were, had learned to do Om instead of Om. It doesn't really matter. I mean, the Om is the easiest one to get low. Om, no. Anything that you can, any sound that you can make that has a hollow in your voice and opens up the channel all the way through so you can see it lower, you might be having a problem. You might be going, Om, and you're not really feeling anything. So then try it lower. Om, Om. It really is about opening your throat too. For those of you that have had problems with speaking your truth, saying what you need to say, this can be challenging, because basically you're taking energy from low and you're running it through an open channel. Anytime you constrict here, it just gets weird. You don't have the ability to really bring it forward. So and the chant, so the pelvic thrusting was a couple of minutes, the belly breathing was 5 minutes, the oming is a couple of minutes. I care more about the quality than the quantity at this point with the things that you're doing. Quality. So practice, play around a little bit of that om, om, om. There's no vibration. Om, om. So sometimes, like I started that, I didn't have any vibration. I closed off to get a little vibration and to really power up. You've got to use your abdominal. This one you do have to use your abdominal muscles for. Because if you don't have any power coming from it, you won't get the vibration. So if you're just going, oh, there's no vibration. But if I dig deep and I get the power, I get a good breath, oh no, I gotta find it. So I'm stuffy right now. I gotta experiment a little with that. So play around with it a little bit. If you're vibrating at all, you're vibrating your vagus nerve, which is something that we want to do. Many of you are going, wow, okay, dude, you didn't call me dude, but I seriously see where I'm looking for, the fact that I always quit. I'm looking for the reasons that this won't work for me. I'm all of a sudden up against I said I wanted to heal. Do I? Last time I asked you to write about what you liked about sex. For some of you, it was like, what do you mean? What? What do you like? What are the components that you like about sex? What does sex represent? Does that mean you feel validated in a way you don't feel validated in other times? Do you want that connection that you don't get at other times? Is that the only time maybe your partner shows up for you in a way that's intimate that you don't have with anybody else? Do you actually like the sex act? That's the thrusting of intercourse part. Do you like the foreplay aspect? Do you like to get naked together? Do you like the orgasm? You couldn't care about the sex. Oral sex, get an orgasm, fine, don't care about the intercourse. There's so many pieces in this that people don't really ever reflect on about what it is. So when the sensuality of it, the fact that maybe that's something you don't do with anybody else, the orgasmic release so you can finally get a good night's sleep, because when you do yourself, it's not the same. Yeah. There's a lot of different ways. And I've seen some of you starting to write about that. But it does really make you deconstruct the whole thing. Somebody wrote about sex and intimacy, decoupling the two. Well, first of all, you can have sex without intimacy and intimacy without sex. So sex does not necessarily mean intimacy, right? Sex means sex. Intimate sex means sex with intimacy. Present sex, connected sex means connected sex. You can have romance without sex, sex without romance. You can have sex without intercourse. I mean, just like, intercourse can be one thing. You can like everything about sex, but you hate the intercourse. You can like nothing about sex except the intercourse. And it goes on and on and on. Maybe you're somebody who your partner gives you a massage before you have sex. And then you're like, I really like the massage and I have the sex because he gave me a massage. So I should just have the sex. So there's a lot there to unpack and take a look at. And then the question becomes, what if you don't like sex? So when I'm in men, when men call me to get help, typically the man calls me if he's in a partnership and he says, I want to figure out how to get my wife to want sex with me. Or I don't. So how do they say it? No, my wife doesn't like sex, and no, my wife isn't having sex with me anymore. We're not having sex, and I want to know how to fix that. My wife, says she doesn't like sex, or acts like she doesn't like to have sex. It's always sad when I have to say, almost all women like sex. They just might not like the sex they've been having or have had. And that happened with my dad too. My mom died when she was 64. So that would have meant my dad was 67. And my dad started dating after that. My dad's like one of those guys that needs to be in a relationship, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But he really, really loved my mom, and they really had a great sex life. So the next woman that he dated, I really liked. I liked her a lot. I thought she was super cool. And about 2 years, year and a half later, he broke up with her, and I was kind of like, what happened there? I thought she was awesome. And he goes, yeah, she's just not really into sex. And I said, did you guys have sex? And he goes, well, no. I mean, we had conversations about it and things, but she just really didn't seem to want to go in that direction. And I said, well, she probably didn't like the sex she had with her husband. And, you could have shown her something different. Curious. So a lot of the time that may be the case. And it may not even have to do if you were abused or not. I mean, if you are somebody who's only had sex maybe a few times and it's always been accommodating what somebody did to you versus you knowing what you wanted, there's a good likelihood that, you're not that thrilled about sex. And so if you have your hand in the air when you're watching this going, yeah, I just don't know about this whole sex stuff, that's okay. So the first thing you have to remember is number one, we can't heal what we can't accept. So the first question I want to ask yourself is, do you need to have sex? Really? I mean, I want to give you permission. I want to give you permission to give yourself permission to maybe just say, I'm not interested in sex. All right. When is that a problem? If you're single, not so much of a problem, right? If you're in a partnership where there was an agreement about sex, like that was, something that's an expectation, a little more problematic. Because if you've had an agreement that sex was a part of the relationship, and that if one of the parties decided it wasn't important to the other anymore, and you both got help to see if there was something that you could change about your sex life, because if it's the fact that you don't like the sex that's happening, that can be fixed. But if you really, honestly, 100% just don't understand what the whole whatever is about it, and you really just aren't really interested in finding out if you could be more aroused or if sex could be better between you and your partner, or you're single and you're just like, what the fuck? What the fuck? What's all the fuss about? It's okay. I want you to really hear this. It's all right to not like sex. Truth. Because sex is like anything else in the world. You don't like going to the zoo? Okay, that's fine. Don't go to the zoo. Now, if you've promised your partner that you're going to go to the zoo with them every Saturday, and all of a sudden, 7 years into going to the zoo every Saturday, you say, hey, guess what? I really don't like the zoo. I really never have liked the zoo. I've just been going for you. I expect there to be a little bit of a, drama around this. Is it good that you finally said that? Absolutely. Should you be going to the zoo every Saturday if you don't like the zoo? No, no, not really. Yeah, you could say, Tanya, you know what? My partner is so awesome that, sacrificing 4 hours to go to the zoo on Saturday is something that I'm happy to do. Okay, of course, that's fine too, right? Like, if that's what you've decided, but don't then have an expectation that you should like going to the zoo if you really don't like going to the zoo. Just know that you're doing that for your partner because you love your partner. And there's all sorts of other things that are so awesome that sacrificing 4 hours to go to the zoo on Saturday is something you're happy to do. Don't be a victim, be conscious. But I want you to be able to 100% accept whatever it is, at least right now for sure, that you honestly feel. Maybe if you had personal validation for yourself, you wouldn't like sex because right now you're using sex to get validation. Okay, something to really understand. That's why I asked you, why sex? Are you trading sex to get romance? Are you trading sex to get attention that your partner never gives you unless you're having sex? Are you trading sex while you're dating to hopefully find somebody who loves you? All right. Now, if you're somebody who really likes sex, really loves sex, and it's not because you're necessarily addicted to sex, because let's talk about that a little bit. If you're really, really into sex, and it doesn't matter who it's with or whether it's connected or intimate or whatever, you just want naked bodies banging together because you want a penis inside of you or fingers inside of you, let's say a penis inside of you, something inside of you, or being there naked with a partner, just being naked, rubbing together, whatever it is there, then it's such a way that really nothing else matters. You don't care if there's intimacy, you don't care if there's connection, you just crave the raw physical act of that. There's nothing wrong with that either, unless you're willing to throw all your values out the window. You're willing to do other things that you don't want to do. So in other words, you're selling, you're addicted. And what I mean, when I talk about addiction, addiction is symptoms of issues that you have. If you're somebody who's doing risky sex, like you're like, yeah, so, I don't use condoms or I don't use dental dams, and I'm not picky about who I have sex with. It's risky. That's the exciting part. Okay, that has an addiction quality to it. Does that mean you like sex? Probably not. You're probably liking the super high dopamine levels. What about, hey, I don't really like to be with a real partner, but I'm totally into porn all the time? Well, that's an addiction as well. And that has to do with artificially high dopamine levels. Porn isn't good for you. One of the only sex teachers probably saying that to you, but porn raises dopamine levels higher than normal experiences do. Now, I'm not talking about if you do it every once in a while. What's every once in a while? You do it a few times a year, whatever. You're doing it a few times a month, more of a problem. You're doing it several times a week, I'd say take the I don't have a porn addiction challenge and go cold turkey for the next 6 months and let your chemistry kind of wind up, get back to its natural. Porn jacks our chemistry way up, our dopamine levels way up beyond what can happen normally, and it can actually create a problem where we don't want to have sex, real sex, where we can't really have sex unless we're fantasizing about the porn that we saw. We don't get aroused anymore on our own. We need outsourcing arousal to get aroused. These are some of the problems that porn can create. So maybe it isn't sex you like, it's the dopamine high that you're like, okay, that's all right. Just identify. What we're doing right now is exploring and identifying what we relate to, what it is. What are your expectations of sex? What does sex fulfill for you? And maybe you're thinking, geez, Tanya, sex is supposed to be spontaneous and fun, and my partner's supposed to just read my mind. And when everything's great and wonderful, and we love each other, and it's like this soul connection to the universe. And now you're like cutting it all up and making it all whatever. Well, first of all, even the fantasy that sex should be a mind, body, soul connection, enhance, hold the hands of God experience is an expectation. And what is it you're looking for in that? What's the expectation that will provide? I've had that sex. I've had all this different kind of sex, all these different kinds of sexes. I have tried all sorts of things, done all sorts of things. And the best satisfying sex was always when there wasn't an expectation of what was actually going to happen. The best sex is when you're 100% present to what is and what's going on. And if all of a sudden, even though best laid plans, maybe you thought, oh, we're going to sit here and we're going to meditate together, and then we're going to gaze into each other's eyes, and we're going to breathe, and we're going to circulate the energy together. And then when we come together in stillness, we're just going to pulse energy through each other, and we're going to have these mindless, blow away endless orgasms for hours, and it'll all be bliss. Okay, sometimes that happens. Sure, you can set out with that intent, but what happens if in the middle of that you're like, you have to pee? I mean, it's life. It's not a fantasy. And when those things all work out and everybody's on board and present and doing this and that, it's great. Absolutely. Just like it's fun to have, for me to have my partner come home and see me at the door and throw me over the couch and take me right there. That's fun too. So part of the problems we have with sex is all the expectations that it's supposed to be something that's like beyond earthly, like love. We have the same expectation of love, like somehow true love and one love and the love and this all thing is some major, like huge thing. And if we have these ideas and expectations around things, we're typically going to have suffering and disappointment. Whereas if we treat sex, that is awesome. I happen to love sex itself. And I love romance and I love connection. I don't have to have them all together. It's great. Those neo-tantric moments of sex when you're, doing all the thing and it's all circulating and working out well. And yes, you're opening layers that you've never had before. Absolutely great. Yes, 100% great. It doesn't happen every time, even with two people who know how to do that. That's an unrealistic expectation, because maybe today I just don't feel the same way. Maybe today I'm, not as present, or he's not as present, or whatever. So the best thing to have with sex is fun. I did have somebody tell me that, that my humor around this wasn't helpful or made them uncomfortable, because that was something that they weren't used to. That humor and sex didn't really go together as much, or it seemed like it was uncomfortable. What I have found is that the more you're able to lighten up about sex, the more you're able to let go of all these lofty, romantic, spiritual expectations. Doesn't mean don't have them. It doesn't mean don't do them. It just it means the expectations are so intense. It's like when the girl, as a little girl, pictures her wedding in her head, right? And it's just this epic, perfect fairy tale wedding. And then she goes to plan that wedding one day when she finds the man of her dreams, and everything doesn't turn out perfect. And her entire, everything's bad. It's all bad. Instead of the fact that the cake was molded underneath, just the cake was bad, the entire wedding was ruined. We kind of treat sex that way. So if we can let go of this idea of having this perfect sexual experience all the time, or every time, or some of the time, and instead get present and have fun, see what happens, we're going to have a lot better sex. You know why? Because it's going to be fun. And fun sex is good because, it's just funnier. And yes, you may think, well, why laughing about sex? No, it's a lot more fun, and it takes a lot of the pressure off. Most people, both genders, have a lot of pressure around sex. Lots of pressure around sex, of all what it's supposed to mean and all that. Same thing with love, but we're not really talking so much about love here today. All right, so when you get clear about what your expectations are around or from sex, then you can start to go, oh, wow. And so when that doesn't get met, then it's all bad, instead of just that one piece is bad. Let's say today, you were really great. You planned the time, the kids are gone, whatever, you're going to have a great time, and your partner shows up and they don't look at you the way that you fantasized they were going to look at you when you set this whole thing up. You went to a romantic space or whatever, did the dinner. Worst thing is to do is go dinner and then have sex. You're full, you don't feel as good, people fart, stuff happens. That's not the best way. Romantic dinner and sex, no. Better to have fasting and sex, and then go to the romantic dinner after sex. That's how it is. But one thing goes wrong in all this and we're throwing the whole thing out. So from this, number one, it's okay to not like all aspects of sex. It's okay to not like sex at all, or the sex that you've been having and you don't know that there is anything else. It's okay to take a moment and in fact, it's not only okay, this is imperative. If you like to heal around this issue, it's imperative that you get 100% honest. 100% honest with yourself. Now, This is not a couples sexual healing class. I do teach those. So, if you are coupled, you have to be the one in the dynamic of doing this on your own. And that's what you do. And yes, it can be a little dicier because you are in a partnership. But I am saying that if you work on yourself in regards to this and you pay attention to what I'm teaching and you bring this to the table, the dynamic, your changes will start to change the dynamic of your relationship. That won't always be easy. That can be hard. There can be things that go on. You can always email me. I do work with couples, so we could definitely do that. So don't dismay. But if you can't get honest with what's going on, you won't heal. You can't accept it. You can't heal. You can't move it. And that will be sabotage. So if you're faced in here, we're on call 6. If you're faced with, oh my gosh, I've been doing some of this, but now I keep going away, or I show up for some of it, or this isn't going to work for me, or nothing's ever going to work, it's too hard. What expectation you have around where you should be now is going to hurt you. Where you should be is where you are. And if you want to change that, you have to do something that you haven't been doing, which is be curious and move forward. Keep doing the practices. Be honest. Get real. Get real. The fantasy you're having about how it should be is not going to work. The expectation of where you should be is not going to work. You are where you are. The most incredibly important thing you're ever going to do in this workshop, in this class, is to get present, right? Which is why we do all the practices. Okay, so it could be if you don't like sex, you don't like the sex you've had, you don't know there's anything different. So, okay. And if you have expectations of sex that are just like out of some storybook and they don't get met, then it's your expectations that are creating the problem. Okay, that's a lot, isn't it? I mean, asking these questions, showing up to find out what your truth is, can be really scary. If you're single and all of a sudden you're going, crap, I really never liked any of the sex that I had, and I thought there was something broken with me. Maybe why does that mean you're broken? If you don't like sex, does that mean you're broken? No. And like I said, it could be that you don't like sex because of the sex you've had. Can that change? Absolutely. But you have to get present. You have to get 100% present. All right. What's going to keep you from, we're on 6, we got 7, 8, we got, essentially 3 more things coming on, 3 more weeks happening. Many of you are hitting the thing that I call the void. You're hitting up against the place where your neural pathways are going to have to lay down new networks, and they don't want to. So if you find yourself hitting up against something or avoiding an exercise that I give you, rationalize it, say, I don't need that. Oh, I know that. Anytime somebody says, oh, I know. When you say I know, you tell me you're not listening. So if I'm saying stuff, you're like, oh yeah, I know that. That means you've tuned me out and you're not listening. I don't know what that gets you. I know that what means that you've got a block happening there. You may know it, but do it in the context of this class. Do it as I say to do it in the context of this class, and be curious about what it shows up, what difference shows up in this sequence of how we're doing things. If you're picking and choosing things along the way, you're missing the power of the reason they're given to you in this format. Maybe you're behind. Maybe you're behind. And if you're behind, then start up and just start doing it. Remember, you're not going to lose these tools. You're going to have access to recordings and things like that. I'm going to put all of this actually in a membership program at some point where you'll be able to just go in anytime and look over these things, right? So you've got access to that. So don't feel like you're going to lose out. The one thing you'll lose out on is asking me questions. And so that's something that is definitely important and something you definitely want to do. But let's talk about today. I want to talk about orgasms, which has to do with some of our homework. Orgasm, if you've never had one, and people will say, well, how do I know if I've had an orgasm? And it used to be somebody would tell you, well, if you don't know, you haven't had one. But that's not necessarily true. I've worked with women who thought they were not orgasmic and they actually were, but they might be what I call low arousal orgasmic, tension release orgasmic. For instance, they will have this little kind of experience where their body just releases a little bit of tension so small that they may not even notice it with a bunch of stuff going on. I've also known women who completely are their body is orgasmic, but they're not connected to their orgasm, so they don't actually feel it. In other words, if you were to have your fingers inside their yoni, you'd feel the contractions and the waves and the pulsing and the engorgement and the wetness and all that. Orgasm happening, they're not feeling it, disconnected from it. So that's possible too. If you're non-orgasmic and you're non-orgasmic, and that doesn't mean that you can't have orgasms through intercourse. That means that you don't have orgasms at all, except maybe in a dream. But when you touch yourself, you're not orgasmic. When somebody uses their fingers, you're not orgasmic. Their tongue, you're not orgasmic. Toys, you're not orgasmic. Intercourse, you're just not orgasmic. And like I said, then it's deciphering between you are having ones, but you don't feel it, versus you're not having them at all. If you're not having them at all, have never had one at all, then definitely you need to let me know that. And I would tell you, do the practices. But I want to know, because I'd like you to keep up with me after this and see how long doing the practices takes before things happen, or to clear up any ignorance that is around this. Because like I said, there are women who are having orgasms, but because it doesn't feel like something they read about, or it doesn't feel like something they think it should, their expectation about it is skewed, they don't even know. Or maybe they're orgasmic through intercourse, but not anywhere else. And so they think, oh, there's something wrong. It's not wrong to not have an orgasm during intercourse. Not wrong for any of this, isn't wrong. It just is. It's where you are, whatever it is you are. 87% of women do not have orgasms through intercourse. They may have orgasm through intercourse if their clitoris is being stimulated in just the right way. And that could mean that you're on top, you're rubbing your own clitoris, you're rubbing it along somebody's body that you're touching. So, you're getting some stimulation from the clitoris. And that way, if you're penetrated with that, then you're orgasmic. Some people, it's because their anatomy is just built the right way. Women whose clitorises are closer to the vaginal opening tend to be more orgasmic during intercourse than women whose clitoris is further away. You can learn, by the way, you can teach your body to have all the different orgasms that are available. What are the different orgasms that are available? It's enough to just really blow your mind. But you can be nipple orgasmic and lip orgasmic. I'm talking these lips, right here under your top of your lip, where there's that little skin, flap of skin, that has a direct access to your clitoris. And once I say that, you see all these women are like, trying to get their finger up in their mouth to see how that is. Stimulating the nipples and the breasts also leads to arousal. Your breast may not be sensitive like that. You may not be connected to it like that. Most of the time it's about being disconnected and not aware, not that we're offline or there's something wrong. You can have, of course, clitoral orgasms. You can have labia orgasms. You can have G-spot orgasms. And everybody like, where is the G-spot? Well, if this is, let's see, how do I do it on video? If, like this. So if this is your vaginal opening, and there are the muscles that you feel right in the beginning of it. Right behind those muscles, all of a sudden your finger will curve up. It'll go up into the wall. Typically it's right there. Now look how little of my finger is in there. All right. However, for some women, it can be further back, where it's actually like 2 to 3 inches, 4 inches back, closer towards their cervix on the wall. But it's the upper wall of the vagina. What if you say, I can't find my G-spot? And I remember the 70-something-year-old lady at a workshop put her hand up and said, honey, are you going to tell me where my G-spot is and how to find it? And I'm like, absolutely, yes, I will. For some, it's a little bit rough, like the very top on that wall Everything's smooth, 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 and then you'll find just a little bit of a rough area. When it's engorged, when your G-spot's fully engorged, it's way easier to feel because it actually feels like a bump. It drops down. And it's so instead of your finger going in and up to find it, it literally just can go in and it's touching it because it's dropped it down. Now, there is a procedure that you can have done. I don't suggest you do this, but where they go and they inject collagen behind the G-spot so that it fills it up and drops it down. So that means when you're having intercourse, it's being contacted way easier, so there's more arousal. Well, you can also get scarring from doing that. You can create nerve damage from doing that. To me, that's lazy because the reason most women haven't experienced their G-spot is because they haven't gotten aroused enough. This is the whole problem with most orgasm. When the G-spot drops, then obviously something doesn't have to go up like this to contact it. If the G-spot drops, then it's completely right there in alignment, right? So instead of having to go like this, because it just goes in and feels it. That makes things feel a lot different. So G-spot orgasms, vaginal orgasm, U-spot, I-spot, Y-spot, W-spot, cervical orgasms. What does all this mean? Typically, it means that your arousal was high enough that you surrendered into the pleasure and orgasm happened. If you have to force an orgasm by all your concentration and having everything just so specific and tensing all your muscles and concentrating so hard for it to happen, you weren't aroused enough. You were forcing the orgasm to happen. So I tell you all these different type of orgasms, not because I want you to keep track and figure out like, oh, you don't need to have all those orgasms. Not at all. In fact, if you decided to be not orgasmic or non-orgasmic and you were happy in your life, your sex life for you was the way you wanted it to be and you were thrilled and happy with it, fine. You don't need to even have an orgasm. Orgasm is not going to change your life if your life is happy and you are happy. So I need to take the pressure off right now. You're not more of a woman because you have 5 orgasms versus 2. It's not a measure of how sexy you are, how sexual you are. It's a thing. It's like, do you go and see the penguins at the zoo or do you prefer the bears? Okay. That said, if you want to explore and see about different types of orgasms, then do the practices. It's all about how you accept where you are and build on things from there without that pressure of you're less than or can't do something right. And if you have a partner who's like, their entire life is about your orgasm, then the conversation has to be had like, look, that's just too much pressure for me. If your validation is built on the ability to give me an orgasm, there's a problem because number one, nobody gives somebody else an orgasm. We surrender into the pleasure or experience we're feeling, right? The fall into the pleasure. The pleasure becomes so pleasurable, we just fall into it. It's not about getting to it or having to do something super hard to get there. That's when we're trying to orgasm with very little arousal. So yes, you are capable, unless you have nerve damage, of having a plethora of different types of orgasm, including female ejaculation. Now, some people like to make that be fancy and say Amrita, the nectar of the gods. Basically, you don't need to elevate it either. You can do that, of course. I call my yoni because I like that word. I don't like the word squirting or, men calling me up saying, I want to teach my wife to squirt. I don't care for that myself. Amrita is fine. Basically, it's prostate, like a female prostate fluid coming out. And in a lot of women, this is going to shock you. A lot of women, there's an amount of urine in it as well. And what happens is when the G-spot gets stimulated, it's laying along the urethra, right? And it gets stimulated, especially when you're trying to do it really hard. it causes spasms in the urethra, which can go along a nerve root that feels really good, but then it can also cause spasms in the bladder. Okay. I personally don't care. Like if it feels good, I don't really care. Am I peeing? Am reading? Am I, nectar of the gods? Am I whatever I am? It doesn't really matter. Feels great. Let it go. A lot of women, when they start to feel that pleasure from that G spot orgasm, freak out because it feels like they're going to pee. So they stop it. I say put down a bunch of towels and try it out and see what happens. And I haven't met myself personally very many people, men or women, who freak out or care. If you're in that kind of pleasure, nobody's really caring much about anything. So letting it go, that expectation that that's all elegant as well, is good. Now, there's plenty of people that will tell you, it's all been tested and it's different composite. Yeah, because the Skene's glands, the tiny little glands that are around the opening of the vaginal area and around the urethra and there's lots of glands everywhere in our body, will put out fluid that is different, that's not urine. It has a different composition. So it can be a combination of these things. And once again, do you have to do it? No. Do you want to experiment with it? Sure. Sometimes women had that experience early on in their sexual life, and they felt like, because they didn't know, they felt like they peed. And so from then on, they totally shut down all their arousal because they were embarrassed or worried. So boom, all their arousal shut down. It's not, if you've seen the porn where, women are copious amounts of fluid is flying out of their body. That is, and I know a lot of the women who do those types of videos and stuff, that is mainly urine because they're drinking tons of fluid beforehand and to get that big show going on. Now, there are women who have gone and emptied their bladders completely, gone to have G-spot massage done, and had, some little bit of significant squirting, like, coming out a few inches or a few feet, and said their bladder was completely empty just a few moments ago. Well, the bladder can fill up pretty fast. You may be somebody who has more fluid than somebody else. You may be somebody who's having female ejaculation, but you're just leaving a wet spot on the bed that's not that significant, but you're still experiencing it. So the fluid amount doesn't really matter. If we can get out of our way and not worry about what the heck is happening and just be in the moment of the pleasure, once again, then it all doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is if you don't want to change your sheets, that you put down some plastic sheets or that you put some towels under you. That's the only thing that really matters, because guess what? Everything washes off in the end anyway. So no worries. What else do I want to say about orgasm? So if you're not having orgasm, then once again, finding out if it's not or you're just disconnected from it. If you've been with a partner who was shocked if you said you didn't have an orgasm because they're feeling all the things that would normally say you are, then you may be disconnected, in which case, just do the practice. That's the whole point, is we're getting connected to that part of our body. If you're somebody who has to really work hard at having an orgasm, that's typically because you haven't been aroused enough. Now, you may be mentally aroused, but you may be physically not. Or you may be physically aroused, but mentally not there. These things all need to hook up. What is arousal? When you are really aroused, now, most women can have an orgasm like in a 1 or 2 out of a 10. And because we've trained ourselves to have them, to force that tension release, to hold our breath, to focus, to have it just right. It has to be perfect. If something moves, then we don't have one. That's forcing an orgasm. If you want to do that, I'm not taking it away from you. I'm just saying that that's a lower level arousal orgasm, and they're harder. They take more work. Sometimes you have a headache after them because you had to hold your breath to get there. You think, wow, all that for just that, why bother? Okay. If you're not really aroused, and I find that most women I talk to are not really aroused in the way that they can be, then yes, orgasm can prove to be more difficult. If you were to spend, and if you're doing that, sometimes it can take 45 minutes to 2 hours to get your body used to actually getting back to what arousal really looks like, which is full engorgement of your labia. Your clitoris comes out, comes out, it gets engorged, it gets way bigger than it is. And I have a pretty small clitoris, but definitely gets bigger, and it doesn't disappear like they do when you're trying to force an orgasm. Sometimes it just pulls in and it's like, what the hell? Where did that go? What happened? Yes, clitorises can actually retreat. And that's typically if they're getting too much stimulation, they might disappear until you're really aroused, in which case they stay. But the clitoris gets engorged, the labia gets engorged, the internal clitoris gets engorged, and you get so tight because everything's engorged and turbid that all of a sudden the finger might feel tight getting inside of you. Engorgement feels like any motion or breath you take, you're going to have an orgasm because you're so engorged. There's so much blood there. There's so much, your G spot is dropped. Everything is tight and filled up. It takes very little stimulation to set you off. Now, I found that out, and it's kind of a funny story. By one day had been fooling around. In fact, it had been a couple of days of fooling around with this guy that I was really attracted to visually and smell. There's another thing too, smell. So visually and smell wise, and we had just a great vibe going on. So I was aroused on, intellectually aroused by him. I was aroused on all cylinders. And we had fooled around for a couple of days, fooled around with our clothes on, had not taken our clothes off. By the time we got to taking the clothes off, he was very masterful. He'd learned several techniques that if I didn't have all that other chemistry and arousal with him, they might have just been techniques, but everything was a go in lots of ways. And so he touched me, fingers, mouth, like hours of foreplay. There was no intercourse happening, and I had to go to the bathroom. I went in to pee, and I had an orgasm because I was so engorged that the pee coming through the urethra and coming out was enough to set off, going by the G spot was enough to set off an orgasm. I was like, what the heck? And when I went to wipe myself, I was like, what the hell is happening down there? Because everything felt different. So he had this little mirror. It had a sink with this mirror right above the sink. And I was younger and thinner and things like that. And I'm like, oh, I can do this. So I set my butt on the edge of the counter and put one leg up the wall so I could get the mirror visual on what the heck is happening. And everything looked completely different. I have never been that aroused before. I didn't even know that was possible. That level of engorgement was like crazy town. And it was, yeah, there wasn't trying to have an orgasm. It was pretty well just orgasmic. So when I went back out and I had to say something like, I don't, and he goes, oh yeah, he says, it takes a while for most women to get there. Most men just don't have the patience, or most women don't have the patience to let that happen. But having intercourse from that perspective, holy crap, that is so different than the intercourse that I had been having before. Everything, just the touching of the penis to my vaginal lips was orgasmic. Everything, it was excruciatingly pleasurable and slow. Just had to be slow. Everything was sensitive. It was crazy town. Who knew? Now, if I'm describing that and you're like, what? Then yeah, you haven't been aroused enough. It doesn't mean you haven't been turned on. You may have think that you've been turned on the most you've ever been in your life, because up until that moment, I'd been with men who I thought, wow, that was the best sex I've ever had. Wow, I was so turned on. I just had no calibration anywhere in that area, right? Mine was all here, like for a level 2 of arousal, that's the best ever, right? This was like, holy crap, 10, 100, whatever plus. Now, is all my sexual encounters like that? No. Once again, remember expectations. Once you have it great, then you think you need it greater, then you think you need it greater. It doesn't always work that way. Sometimes it's great, and sometimes it comes back, sometimes it's better, sometimes it's less, and it's different. Sex is always different if you're present, especially. So that is one thing, though, is that level of engorgement means, that level of arousal means that you're not trying to have an orgasm. Somebody's not trying to give you an orgasm. You're not trying to have one. If you've never been that engorged, And what I want you to do this week is check your engorgement level. And what that means is feel yourself. That means you're going to have to put your hands on your vulva. And for some of you, that might be uncomfortable. You might like, hey, I don't like doing that. Take some breaths, get present, hand on your vulva, and just feel it. Get a mirror and take a look. What do your structures look like externally? Open up a little bit, check yourself inside. What do you look like? Just calibrate that, check it out. So when you do this next part of this, then you can look at that too. So what if you have a partner or you're self-pleasuring, you're masturbating a lot, you're somebody who's doing a lot of that right now, or or engaged in sex with your partner, then I want you to check out how engorged you are when you are masturbating on your own and when you're being pleasured by your partner. Uh, Try to get an idea of engorgement with your body. It might be very new to some of you. It's okay. For the rest of you, you may already know where you are right now. What type of what does engorgement feel like? What's the difference? So check that out, get a mirror and see. Give yourself I'm starting here now. Look at yourself when you're not engorged at all, right? And then calibrate that with when you are. Does that mean that I want you while you're making out with your partner to say, hang on a second, I got to go grab a mirror and check this out? Absolutely. Yep. Have a mirror in the bathroom, go check out what's happening. Try to think about like, how excited do I feel? What's my engorgement level look like? And then I'd like you to work on getting to the most engorged. All right. Some of you, this is too big of a step. I get that. All right. If it is, then basically baby steps like we do with everything else. Because this week we were self-pleasuring before, and self-pleasuring was about pleasuring your whole body. It wasn't about increasing horniness, right? This week, I would like you to touch your clitoris, touch your vulva, touch your nipples, touch anything that makes you aroused. And when I say sexually aroused, I'm not meaning body. Let's say horny. Which makes you horny? Let's just say that. Horny in the genitals. Oh my gosh, orgasmic, like if you were going to have an orgasm. But what I don't want you to do this week is I don't want you to have any orgasms this week, even if you're easily orgasmic. So this week is no orgasm, no matter what. All right. But it is lots of arousal. So everything you can do to bring up your horny level, but no orgasm. Is that clear? Bring up the horniness level, whether that's, having your partner touch you and play with you, you touching and playing with yourself. Bring up that level. If you're somebody who's like, Tanya, I don't even get aroused, that's okay. Now you're going to see, what does it take and can I do it? And all bets are off on here. I'm okay with, I'd prefer you didn't use porn, but I'm okay with fantasy for this experience. I'm okay with, you see somebody super hot, like objectifying some other people, that's fine. Whatever you can do to get connected to that horny arousal in your genitals. We're not trying to do anything else with it right now. I just want you to be really, really horny for the full week without having an orgasm. Get that level as high as you can. Like I said, engage your partner. Say, can't have an orgasm this week. Homework says no orgasm, but I can definitely get really, really horny. Because I want you to see what happens. Do you get frustrated so that you're trying to get rid of that energy? Do you get discouraged because you can't sustain it? Are you able to have it and it's like just building and building and building and building and you're like, you're going crazy, can't sleep, whatever. Hopefully you'll be letting me know what happens while you do that this week. If this is like way too scary, way too much, then of course tell me and I'll give you a micro practice to this. But what we really want to do is build up that big energy in that one small place to see what it is you do with that. Now, if you can ride that energy all week, like if you can get yourself at a super high level of engorgement and breathe into that and stay with it, what'll happen is you'll probably have an orgasm without even touching yourself. your level gets high enough, I can take a breath right now and have an orgasm. I'm not particularly horny. I'm probably at a level 1 or 2. You know, I'm usually aroused, but not like, you know, and I could take a breath and have an orgasm. Is that the same as when I'm like, really? No, it's not. It's nice. It's a champagne bubble, which feels awesome, but it's not one of those, woo, I'm screaming my, you know, lungs out because the energy's got to go somewhere because it's so big. But how you get there to have orgasms that just you fall into, that don't take work, is keeping your horny level way high so that you finally get aroused enough that your body goes, oh yeah, I'm just falling into this. Doesn't have to, it just happens. That may not happen this week for you. If you're somebody who has a lot of sexual energy running already, that may. Sometimes it takes people several weeks, but this is just a week we're playing with. This is an experimentation. There's no goal except no orgasm. That's what I want you to attempt, to not have an orgasm. And what I mean by that is manually or intercourse wise, or that. If you have an orgasm just sitting around because your energies are so high, that's fine. That you didn't help that, that's not, but don't give yourself or have somebody give you an orgasm this week. Now, you're still doing static hold. Static hold is something I want you to basically do for the rest of your life. So just so you know that 5 minutes of static hold every single day. And if you're saying to me, I'm not doing it every day, I'm just saying, why? Like, how is it that you can't do 5 minutes of a static hold every day? Just do it. Do it. Don't kind of do it. 100% this week, 7 days a week, static hold. And your right hand is down over your second chakra, over your vulva, just like that, not between your legs like that, but just laying there like that, right? So right hand down, and the left hand this week, let's go back here. So left hand, is it not on the throat? At the base of the throat. Right hand on your vulva, on the top, like I said, not between your legs, because that's almost impossible to do, but just laying like, here's your belly right here, there's your pelvis, just like that, right? Pillows under the arms. Left hand right here. You're still breathing. Hopefully you're breathing all the time now. Work on the belly breaths. So let's do the static hold is 5. Belly breaths, still work on those. Let's go 2 for that. And then basically, yes, now that you've done the pulsing, now that you've done the pelvic thrust, you should be more connected and aware with your vulva and your vagina. And that should be on your radar now. So this week is touch yourself, have somebody else touch you. You're going to masturbate this week. You're going to bring up the sexual energy and arousal in your body. And I say, how long do you do that for? As long as you can. The whole point is to really bring up the energy, but not to release it. Lots of energy up without releasing. Be in communication with me this week, either on the wall or messenger, but definitely be in communication with me, because the calibration of where everybody is, there's 30 of you. I don't know where everybody is on this. So I'll help calibrate your exercises by you talking to me about it. And you're checking on engorgement, right? So engorgement when no arousal, and engorgement when there is arousal. So I think that pretty well does that. And of course, I'll write that on the wall. Now here's something that I wanna, it was great. One of you bought my book, bought this book, which is Attaining Personal Freedom. And I wanted to bring this up because this is something that's going to be happening to you guys right now in the process of doing all this. So if you don't mind, I'm going to take a moment and read from my book, because this is The Void. This is pretty important stuff. It's called At the Edge of the Void. This is the chapter. There's this phenomena which happens when you create a new neural pathway from a very old and entrenched program or a network of them. In this case, it would be you're working on healing some sexual disconnect or sexual dysfunction or sexual dis-ease in your body, right? I call it experience the edge of the void, or as Bev, one of my coaches, has said, the edge of your personal unknown. You won't feel this as much with smaller neural pathways changes, but the big ones have huge networks, fibers that weave around the very fabric of who you believe you are, then yes, most definitely, this will happen. The void is a place many people who are on a self-growth path step up to and then turn back and run to safety from. Sometimes only once, but more than often not, over and over again. This experience is one that leaves people believing they can't change, or believing they need a different self-help program or a different workshop or something different. The reason big core change can be so scary is because once you create that process of deprogramming, that's what you guys are doing right now, when the destruction of one pathway occurs as another one's being built, there's nothing in front of you to take its place. As you stand looking into the void, it feels like facing death. And truthfully, it is. It is the demise of an old and familiar path created in your brain by your past and the death of who you believe you are and were. It's the most lonely and courageous adventure you will ever face, to stand staring into the void, to the unknown self, and walk forward creating your path as you go. Yet it's the only way your authentic truth is created, and the only way your personal freedom will be attained. Just like all growth and healing, moving into the void takes place in spaces where between the action. It occurs in the stillness of the moment, that pause between the breath, the space between the atoms. And as you take the next in-breath, inspiration fills you and becomes the expression of your presence in each moment, moving you forward, letting go of the old programs and experiencing the creation of you authentically. It's beyond all reasonable survival instincts and an assault to everything primal in you to step into the void. Our prime directive of survival is habitually on high alert about these immense pattern interrupts. Remember, the internal prime directive is to stay the course unless an outside extreme experience forces you to change. I talk about this earlier in the book. Thousands of cultures have centuries upon centuries of traditions surrounding these breakthroughs, all of them guided by elders, mentors, shamans, or others who've walked into their own unknown. We need someone to guide us when we reach the void. We need support to stay the course, to know we're on the right track, as it's not intuitive, it's not logical, it's not natural to walk out into nothingness. Some cultures create induced experiences, which give one the feeling of having created a new pathway, but rarely does this happen permanently. The same happens with most workshops that get your dopamine levels going. You get these amazing feelings and epiphanies, and then once you're back home, nothing sticks. This can lead you to be a self-help workshop addict where you keep seeking out the feeling of change and the chemistry feeling of the revelation and connection, yet it's not really getting there permanently. The edge of the void is an intense place, and it's also the place where your ultimate freedom comes from. Once you become familiar with your void and have walked beyond it several times, you'll have what I call mastery in your being. You'll be able to create pattern restructuring with so much ease, it feels like magic. One might be wondering, what are the practices, technologies, and support one needs to make all this happen more effectively without personal trial and error? The coaches that have written about some of the progresses they went through in the next part of the book will fill you in with an overview in just a moment. So this is my book, Attaining Personal Freedom. I wrote the first part of the book, and then most of the book is the first 4 coaches that I certified in this process, part of what you're going through right now, the practices. They wrote about their 2.5 years of training to become a coach. But this idea of stepping into the void. So anyway, thank you for reminding me, you who bought the book and told me, oh my God, that stepping into the void is what's happening while your neural pathways are changing. And it is scary and it's tough. And that's where most people stop, reroute, go back, say that didn't work, whatever. I'll go to another workshop. I'll do this other thing, looking for that high instead of staying the course so that the changes happen. Because once they do, once those neural pathways lay down a new network, that change is permanent. You just do that now. And once you've trained your brain to do that easily, you can wake up tomorrow and say you want to be a vegetarian, you know, or a vegan who gets up at 5 a.m. every morning with no problem, and you're somebody who absolutely is the opposite of that, you don't have a problem doing that. People who have a problem giving up sugar, like I can just say, I'm not eating sugar anymore, and then I'm not eating sugar anymore. My brain does not fight me on things I want to do anymore. This is all possible. So while you're doing these processes and these practices, just remember that the biggest resistance comes typically right before the biggest change. And I hope that's helpful. And if you haven't been sticking with it, and you're somebody who just keeps quitting all the time, please just stay the course. Keep showing up. That's all you need to do is keep showing up, keep showing up, keep showing up. Because eventually all the showing up changes. You create the changes. Okay? Great to see you guys. Thank you so much again for letting me do this way. I feel like I was pretty succinct today. You've got a lot of information your way. Please, of course, ask questions in the group. And I will, I'm just going to go now and upload this and get it to where you need it to be. And I'll see you on the wall. Thanks so much.